So typically, in every year I give lots and lots of classes on how to save seeds, on the subject of things related to seed saving. And they're always very well attended. And of course, we know why. Seed saving is all about sex. Okay? And we are all of us, obsessed with sex, even if it's only rutabaga sex. Okay? We're very intrigued with this, how do things come into being? And very often when I'm giving, particularly if I'm giving talks at high schools or something, and I always point out to the students, rhetorical question is, what's the purpose of sex? And there's always some smart kid comes up and says, one kid says, because it feels good. Well, I didn't argue with him, certainly, but I didn't ask him how he knew that. He was in high school. But anyway, so that may be true, but that doesn't work for everything. Praying mantises, they get eaten up by it. It's not fun for them. Most of the big cats, when they have sex, it's painful for them. They don't like it at all. So it's not just that, obviously. And then the question that most of them usually ask is, it's a way of increasing the population. That's kind of obvious, isn't it? It's not the best way of increasing the population. The best way of increasing the population, the most efficient way of increasing the population with asexual. For example, like a lot of things like potatoes, like mint plants, you just divide them, put the shoots in, and they reroot themselves. If that was such a great idea, then why has Mother Nature, since almost the dawn of life, has come up with this strategy of sexual propagation? Why is it so important? And it would be much more important, an oak tree, for example, instead of making all that investment and effort, making all those carbohydrates and all that stuff, making deals with the squirrels and all that, to get those, make those acorns. If it says, what the hell, I'm just going to drop a lot of twigs. When my leaves hit the ground, they'll all take root, and I'll get new oak trees. So some things do exactly that. So what compelling advantage does sex have for so many living things that they prefer it to asex? And the answer, quite simply, is diversity. Because let's take this guy here, for example. Okay, he looks like a good, healthy guy. He's probably perfect in some ways. He probably never gets a cold. I, on the other hand, get a cold every year. And when I get it, I almost die from it, let's say. Okay, it's good, sooner or later I'll be done in by a cold, not him. On the other hand, this guy's really wicked rugged. I'm just a wimpy little, so there's some things he has a genetic advantage over me, and vice versa. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, down to teeny little things. And some of these things are very important, some of them not so. But if everyone in the world was propagated from him, or from me, we'd be in serious trouble, because we'd have an individual or a population who in some ways were supermen, in some ways were basket cases. Okay? The solution that Mother Nature figured out billions of years ago is this thing called sex, exchanging genetic material back and forth, reshaking the dice every so often, getting some new combination of genes, which sometimes is no better than, sometimes much worse than the original, sometimes is an improvement. And of course the process of evolution filters them all out. So theoretically we keep improving a little all the time. So a very important point here is the big advantage, and don't ever forget it. The real reason for sex is diversity. To keep we're juggling a whole lot of pins and keeping them all in the air, not letting any of them hit the ground. That is, so I mean, who is it important to, this genetic diversity? I'm going to ask any of you, did you have breakfast this morning? How many of you had breakfast this morning? And how many of you are expecting and hoping to have breakfast tomorrow morning? Jeez, you guys. If it weren't for diversity, crop plant diversity, you would have not had breakfast this morning, and you could not look forward to any tomorrow morning. Because the crops that we eat would have suffered so much, they would have not gone extinct, they would at least they wouldn't be productive as they are. It's this diversity that keeps food in your tummy. So appreciate genetic diversity hugely. As they got me on kind of a tight schedule here, so I'm trying to keep this organized, which is not usually, organization is not a word that's usually associated with Will Bonsall. But I am the director of this thing called the Scatterseed project, and Mom here did this, just helped me point out that this thing here says something I probably shouldn't say. Because my Scatterseed project, ordinarily, I grow, maintain thousands of varieties of mostly crop plants, maintain them, keep them alive, and share them, offer them to people like you, gardeners and farmers who want them. This last couple of years, due to a bunch of disasters including funding shortfalls. Most of my collections, of thousands of varieties, are not available. In fact, many of them, the seed is dead. I've got to get them back again, if I can get them back. Some of them perhaps are even extinct, although in most cases not. So, so anyway, this does not mean you could send a postcard to Will Bonsall and send him some money, he'll send you some seeds. If you look on my website, Scatterseed Project, and there's a, for one thing you can do, however, this is Maine. As the State Forest Service says, keep Maine green, send money. And so one thing you can do is I have a donation, Patreon account there, or you can just send donations or whatever. That will help so that next year we will be offering hundreds and hundreds of varieties and in future years. But right now I've been knocked down very far down for various things and trying to claw back to having things to share again. So take that with a grain of salt, but it sounds like Will Bonsall is doing all this, has been doing this for decades, and is hopefully before he dies going to get back to doing it again soon. In the meantime, this is not a good year. I have a few things to offer, but most of the stuff is, plus it's getting late in the year for ordering seeds anyway. So several very important examples of what happens when we do not have enough genetic diversity. One of the classic examples that everyone knows, we had it in our history books in high school, in the 1840s, the potato, which had been originally came from the Andes, the Altiplano, the region of Peru, where the Incas raised them, had many, many, many varieties. Even today, the typical Quechua farmer will have maybe as many as 40 varieties maintained on many, and this is not a collector, this is just a regular farmer, and he'll have a little, up here at 10,000 feet, he'll have a postage stamp sized garden, maybe the size of this room. You have one variety. 2,000 feet further down the hill, you have another, all of these little small little gardens, terraces, with growing on them. And that gives the individual or the village a lot of security from this diversity. Well, when the Spanish came to Peru, and eventually in the 1500s they took the potato back to Spain, eventually went back and forth, ended up in Virginia, went to England and so on. And in the process of these back and forth, all those potato varieties did not go with them. Basically, one or two varieties or so came over, and they were very liked and they were propagated. One of them, the most popular, is called lumpers. It's a variety which is very heavy yielding. It was very popular, grown all over the British Isles and much of the northern part of the European continent by farmers. Very popular because it yielded very well. The problem with it, it was very vulnerable to a disease, late blight of potatoes. During years when late blight pressure was not very much, then people got lots and lots of potatoes. During other years when there was a heavy pressure, then people starved. Well, in the year, I don't know, it was 42 or something like that, there was a year when just before the harvest time, the weather was really bad, cold and raining, and potato blight was rampant in the fields, particularly in the British Isles. It was all over northern Europe, but we mainly know of it as the Irish potato famine. And crops that were dug on the ground rotted on the ground in piles, or if they got into the cellar, they rotted in the cellar. And it was particularly important in Ireland because Ireland was mainly, most of the good farmland was owned by English absentee landlords. And so the Irish peasants living on the land that had once been their own were growing crops which the landlord demanded they grow. And the main crops were things like wheat, which was exported to England, okay, because it was higher paying than potato. So the Irish had to grow something that they could grow cheap and abundantly to feed those big families. Potato worked very nicely. So this was a sustainable, not a just system, but a sustainable system for decades while Irish families lived off from potatoes. Well, came that year of the famine, of the plague, of the, not the plague, but the disease, potato disease. It totally failed. In fact, curiously enough, during the year we talk about the Irish potato famine. Irish people were starving for lack of potatoes. Meanwhile, Ireland was exporting wheat to England. So there wasn't enough food there. There wasn't enough food that local people could afford. Eventually, the Queen herself got involved in this, and they said no more. So they put a ban on exporting food from Ireland to England for a while. Too little, too late. But in the process of this, over 2 million Irish people, over 1 million Irish people starved to death, and about another 1 million emigrated to a place like Canada, Australia, U.S. So that one variety called lumpers, as I often point out, this single variety is the main reason why O is the biggest section of the South Boston phone directory. Okay? O'Malley, O'Brien, O'Rourke, or something, okay? And eventually, now this is the bad side of the story. In time, in particular, a guy, I think it was a minister named Clifford, I think his name, either in England or I think it was in New England. He had a friend who was a sea captain. And he had him bring back from Chile some seed balls. They're the sexual propagation, like kind of little green tomatoes that form on some potato plants that have sexual seed in them. He brought some back to his farm, which I'm thinking was in New England. And he planted them out, hundreds of these, got a whole lot of new varieties. When you propagate potatoes sexually, every one of those seedlings is not the original clone, it is a new variety. Put your name on it and whatever. A whole bunch of those. And a big percentage of them died from disease. But there was some of them, a particular one which he named rough chili, rough garnet, it was red colored, rough garnet chili. And it had a lot of resistance to disease. So now we have a potato which resists the disease. From that, many other varieties. One of the first ones to come out of that was a variety called Early Rose. And that still is around. Those varieties still exist, although fortunately you don't see many commercial farmers growing thousands of acres of these vulnerable varieties. But anyway, almost any variety you would buy, potato that you would buy in the store today has Early Rose somewhere in its heritage. Probably in many places. Great grandpa and great great uncle sends bred into it. So this is the good side of the story. This is what meant people can live in Ireland and in Norway and the United States now and have plenty of potatoes to eat because of this one variety and everything that came out of it. So when someone asks what is the importance of crop genetic diversity, I say, did you have breakfast this morning? Another striking example that I learned about way back when I was in college in 1970, there was an epidemic of southern corn leaf blight, which broke out first in Florida. And it was the result, oh, by the way, let's move it. Yeah, keep moving ahead with
Yep.
them. Doing it wrong, good.
We got you.
This guy's a self-starter, he doesn't, yeah. I'm having him do this mainly because most of the things on here do not relate to anything in the text directly. So it's like elevator music, enjoy it while it's going by. But,
About 5 minutes.
yes.
5-minute warning.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's finish briefly talking about the southern corn leaf blight. It started up Florida and immediately spread through all of the cornfields of the United States, including the Corn Belt. And it mainly had to do with something to do with a gene for something called Texas cytoplasm. I don't know if that Texas cytoplasm was the cause of the problem or the solution to it. But anyway, it caused devastation through the corn. But some parts of the country lost 80% of the corn. Nationwide, 15% of the corn was rotten in the fields because of this disease. 15% corn in this country is a multi-billion-dollar crop. 15% of that, a major export crop, industrial crop, and so forth, livestock, food crop. 15% was huge. Had to do something about that really quickly. Well, they could breed for resistance to it, but geez, that could take years, to come up with it. First of all, they had to find varieties that had the resistance. So immediately they start going through the corn collection in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa State. Thousands and thousands of varieties of corn from all over the world. They picked out one in particular, a variety from Mexico, which had resistance to this disease. And so they were, since they had to move quickly, they had to have something so they could hit the ground running next spring. So during the wintertime, in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, where there's the USDA breeding facility, there they could crop stuff year-round. They had several generations, and they were able to, by springtime, come up with a number of varieties which all had this particular resistance to it, so that American corn farmers were able to hit the ground running. Every year, millions of dollars. The National Germplasm System, which keeps all these collections, hundreds of thousands of varieties are maintained there. And millions of dollars are spent maintaining them. And some people try to nickel and dime them and say, can we afford that much? I always point out the example. If during all these years, if all the millions of dollars, all these PhD scientists and breeders, all of the research sources that were going to keep these collections going, let's say if it was all thrown away, and just keep that one variety going, it would still be completely cost effective. And in fact, just the opposite, hundreds of varieties, things are being bred, improved varieties are coming out of things every year from there. But that one single variety would be worth all the money spent on it. So is genetic diversity important? How are we doing?
We've got 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. Anyone got a 2-minute question? I can go on all day long with this, but we have a movie coming out next. So if you want to see more about my Scatterseed project, and especially if you want to donate, but go online and to Scatterseed Project, Will Bonsall, and you'll find information there. And just by the way, we have down at the table, when this is done, we're down there, copies of my book, Will Bonsall's Essential Guide to blah, blah, blah. I didn't put the title on it, my publisher did. But there was a section on it, very extensive, detailed section on sexual propagation, seed saving. The whole book isn't about seed saving, but a lot of it's on marriage counseling and investment advice and whatever. But anyway, there is a unit on seed saving which you might find very useful, so you can always get them down there. And if you get them while I'm down there, you can get them autographed by me, so they'll be worth millions to your great-grandchildren. So anyway, we'll have those down there. And so basically, thank you all. I guess we're ready to go. Okay. Wow. That's the first time I've ever stuck anywhere near on time.